So we ended up bailing. You have to be flexible. Like I drove from 7, I think we got home at like midnight because I had to make a couple stops. Briar wasn't feeling good, and that part was kind of not great. But she loved the camping part, and she talks about it still to this day. See that lone pine up on that hill over there? What are we actually doing right now? The kids are just wild out there. They're wild. But they're having a good time, you know? They're having a good time. This is Untamed, Unbroken, The Adventurer's Guide, and I'm your host, Blake Bredesen. Today's FOQ, frequent outdoor questions, I'm going to tackle one question. What's the best way to prepare kids for their first camping trip? Now, I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. Both have been camping. The 2-year-old has only been camping in an RV. He hasn't been tent camping or anything like that. But our 5-year-old, has been camping since she was since she was 1.5. She's been camping, and she stayed in a camper. We bought a pop-up. She sleeps in a pop-up. Now, she's been camping since she was like 6 months old. Her first camping trip, we didn't have her sleep in the tent. My wife and I slept in the tent. She slept in the camper with my parents, so with her grandpa and grandma. She slept in there, in a pack and play, in a camper, which really, that's pretty easy to do. Okay. But since then, I took her tent camping up north, northern Minnesota. Just did a car camping trip to start. So that would be, step one would be ease into it. Start with something that isn't too much. Like I wouldn't recommend doing a 5-day Boundary Waters trip at 3 years old for their first camping trip experience. You want the experience to be a good one, and you give them that good experience, and then they're going to want to come back for more. They're going to want to keep doing it. And that's what you want. Is it something you enjoy? You want to pass that on to them, so you don't want to ruin it, essentially. And that goes for anything outdoors related when they are this young. If they're older, you can put them through a little bit more. But at 2, at 3, 4, 5, I guess if they're 1 year, like if they're 1, they really don't know any different. But as they get older, they start to know. They can differentiate between a good and bad experience while camping. And so that's number one. Keep in mind that you want that experience to go well for them. So planning and preparing accordingly. Make sure they're warm when they're sleeping in a tent. Like have a nice sleeping bag, sleeping pad, whatever it is. Maybe just start with a nice car camping trip. That's what I did. It was a remote car camping trip. Like I didn't have cell service, but I had a Zoleo device, which is a satellite communication device that I could communicate if needed. There's other campers at this campground. So there's some, communications there if I need it. But I wanted it kind of to be a hybrid, like a little bit remote, but we pulled our truck right up. We had everything we needed, plus some. Pack plenty of snacks and food. That would be another tip. Snacks and food, got to have those. Clothes, make sure you pack enough clothes for them to be warm, depending on the weather. Make sure you're planning accordingly with the weather. If it's going to rain all weekend, I'd bail. I wouldn't even do it. And that's the other thing. Be flexible. If you're going on a trip, have some contingencies. Maybe it's like, all right, we're going to try this place. If it doesn't work out and things aren't going well, We can go home. It's only an hour away. I drove 4.5 hours away. So we were staying one night for sure. We ended up, the plan was to do 2 nights. We ended up leaving the evening of the second day we were there. So we didn't stay that second night. And that is because of a couple things. One, I reserved this site ahead of time online. A week before online, we were able to reserve a site. There was a lag in the communication from where the camping the guy that watches over this campground gets his communication on reservations from another campsite, because he has to drive there, figure out who's reserved. Anyways, there was a lag. He didn't ever find out that I reserved that site. And so when I got there on Friday night, like just before dark, there was people camping in my campsite, like that I reserved. And they were all set up. They had huge tents, like a couple of families. And so I didn't want to kick them out. I wasn't going to kick them out because the next campsite was like, all right, this is good. We'll camp here right next to where we're supposed to be camping. And so we did that. The next day, apparently someone had reserved the site we were in. And so we got kicked out. We got kicked out of that campsite, even though there was 10, 15 other open campsites. They kicked us out, which was pretty annoying. So I had to take everything down. And so we actually just went to another campsite. We hung out there for a while. We walked around. We did some fishing offshore. And then I just decided, like, we're just going to go. And turns out, good thing we did, because Briar started getting sick. And so we had bailed. She started to get sick when we got near Grand Marais, Tofty, Schroeder, like that area. Lutsen, if that's more familiar. If you go straight north of Lutsen, it's about a 45, 50-minute drive from there. And so we ended up bailing. You have to be flexible. Like, I drove from 7, I think we got home at like midnight because I had to make a couple stops. Briar wasn't feeling good, and that part was kind of not great. But she loved the camping part, and she talks about it still to this day. And so this past fall, we went again. We stayed 2 nights just on, my parents have some private land up north, and we stayed there. 2 nights, no campground business, just 2 nights in a tent, truck camping or car camping. Have everything you need packed, ready to go. You can go do day excursions then with the truck. You can have a canoe you can go paddle around, wherever you're at. But with kids, it is have the right mindset, expectations going into it. This isn't going to be a normal camping trip. Be flexible, pack the snacks, all the things. Pack all the things so that they are having a good time and enjoying themselves, so you can keep doing this. And then as the years progress, you can do more and more. By the time they're 6 or 7, they've been camping for 4 or 5 years, or maybe 7 years. If they're 7 years old, maybe they've been camping their whole life. Now you can start to go and push the limits and push the boundaries and do that Boundary Waters trip. Like my first one, I was 8 years old, went on that Boundary Waters trip. But we had been doing some family camping before then. So I was like roaring to go. Like, come on. It's like, let me loose. Yeah, because I was itching to go. I had an older brother, and he was going for 3 years before I got to go. And I was like, I want to go. Let's go. And we did. I did. My first trip was Mud Row, Horse Lake, Horse River, up to Lower Basswood Falls. If you're familiar, right on the Minnesota-Canadian border. It was awesome. Time of my life. And I was hooked. So there's a few tips on easing kids into that first camping trip, and preparing them, and just talk about it with them and be honest and real. Like, don't beat around the bush and sugarcoat shit. That's not going to get you anywhere. Tell them what to expect. Lay out those expectations for them so they know what to expect. Like, hey, we're going to go here. We're going to set up a tent. We're going to get this cool sleeping pad and sleeping bag. You're going to sleep in this thing. Have blankets as a backup if you're car camping. I bring a sleeping bag, sleeping pad. That's what we sleep on. She also brings a couple blankets, and she throws those over her sleeping bag. Bring their stuffed animals. Game changer. Stuffed animals. I'm going to leave it right there. There are other things, and maybe I'll go through a more detailed list or a more detailed overview in the future on this. But the biggest thing is mindset, expectations, being flexible, bringing all the snacks, clothes, all the gear that you, and a little more, like overpack for these first camping trips. Overpack. And go at their pace. Don't try to force things. Just go at their pace and have a good time. Enjoy yourself. It's fun watching your kids enjoy themselves in the outdoors. Thank you for sticking around. If you've enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a rating and review. Even one word, it helps a ton. Sincerely appreciate you guys. Thank you all, and we'll see you on the next one. Stay wild.
You've been listening to Untamed, Unbroken, a Lone Pine Adventures original podcast.